administration is quite unpopular, nothing uncharacteristic of any administration 2 years after an election, especially an administration that came into office in the backdrop of a very dilapidated economy with very many promises, as you said, but I can assure you that will change in due course. The implementation of a manifesto is page by page, chapter after chapter.
But you haven't implemented it. That's the problem.
Sentence. It is being implemented.
How many of the 281 promises have been implemented?
I'll not give you a straight answer of 2 or 10 or 200, but I'll tell you.
You're the first politician who said to me, I will not give you a straight answer, just bluntly. I can give you an answer. I've got the answer. It's 14 out of 281 promises. That means 95% of your promises have not been met 2.5 years in.
That is your number, Mehdi, not my number.
It's not my number. It's the number of Mizalendo, a non-partisan parliamentary monitoring organization in Kenya that tracks all parties. They're saying 14 out of 281. I mean, we can run through some of them. President Ruto said he would give free internet and phone calls to Kenyans. He hasn't. He said he would start an inquiry into cronyism. He has not. He said he would ratify the International Convention Against Enforced Disappearances. He has not. I could go on and on. Kenyans are frustrated because they were lied to during the election campaign.
Well, Mehdi, as I told you, that is the perspective of Mzalendo. And that is their target.
Well, has he ratified the International Convention Against Enforced Disappearances?
We have ratified very many international conventions.
But has he ratified the International Convention Against He said he would do it straight as he comes to power. It's been 2.5 years. He could do it with a stroke of his pen. Why has he not done it?
He is yet to ratify, but it is work in progress. Was there a timeline for its ratification, according to Mzalendo?
Many things had timelines on.
Was there a timeline?
He said he would
no timeline.
He said he would do a public inquiry into cronyism within 30 days. Has he done it?
Public inquiry?
Yeah, a public inquiry to establish the extent of cronyism and state capture and make recommendations. Page 61 of your manifesto. Has he done it? It's been more than 30 days. It's been 2.5 years.
I'll tell you, Mehdi, if you read the NADCO report, there are recommendations on what is to be done on state cronyism, on state capture, on extrajudicial killings. That is captured in the NADCO report.
But you haven't done what the manifesto called for on multiple things. And look, you know, and you admitted, to be fair, that people are unhappy. There's a perception of the government that's unpopular. Kenyans have been most upset about the cost of living. And yet, when thousands of young Kenyans took to the streets in protest of your government last year, the finance bill, your government opened fire on them, killed them, forcibly abducted and disappeared them. How do you justify such a violent crackdown on your own citizens in a democracy?
First, let me say this, Mehdi. As you said, because you never allowed me to answer the question on the promises kept. I told you the manifesto is being implemented chapter after chapter, right from housing to the cost of living that you're speaking about. Because, of course, you cannot judge what was to be done in 5 years, in a short 2 years.
Well, some of them you said you would do in 30 days and you haven't. But just deal with the violence. How do you justify what happened last summer in Kenya?
Now I'm coming to that. You said the cost of living. I can tell you what we've done with the cost of living, from the subsidizing of production rather than subsidizing consumption, as we promised in our campaigns. You remember the first demonstrations after the elections in 2023 were about the cost of living.
Which also were greeted with violence from the state.
And unfortunately, all demonstrations end up with deaths, which is a very unfortunate incident. And it is not true that people demonstrate and you open fire. It is just the nature of what happens with our demonstrations, that they turn violent and the police have to intervene. And let me say that at this point, it's not just unfortunate. We all regret the loss of life during the 2022 demonstrations and even the demonstrations of June last year. Unfortunate that lives had to be lost, but it was not that fire was opened on young.
Yeah, the way you talk, lives had to be lost. No, lives were taken. Right? People were shot in the head.
No life ought to have been lost, and nobody can justify the loss of life anywhere in the world out of demonstrations
According to a Reuters investigation, 19-year-old Charles Owino went to a protest, was killed with a gunshot to the head. The police recorded his death as a road accident. 21-year-old Shaquille Obienge, he died the same day as Owino, also shot in the neck. Police recorded his death as a road accident. If these deaths are so regrettable, why is the Kenyan police covering them up?
Fortunately, Mehdi, we have a very robust constitution in the country, the best constitution in sub-Saharan Africa. This constitution has very good and clear safeguards that makes sure that everybody is held to account for your actions, including the police. You've mentioned 2 or 3 people. I think from IPOA's records, the Independent Police Oversight Authority, from their records, they have recorded about 60 deaths from last year's demonstrations. And there are some, I think about 30-something that are still under investigation. They have dismissed some after close the files after investigation. Therefore, I can assure you, the police may even somebody within the police force may desire to cover up.
Can you tell our audience tonight, how many Kenyan police officers
in the country will not allow you to cover up?
You say that, this is great rhetoric. How many police officers in Kenya have been prosecuted for their role in the violence in 2023 or 2024? Can you tell us how many?
I'll tell you from the last year's demonstrations, 3 are already in court.
3 police officers have been prosecuted?
3 are being prosecuted.
Are being prosecuted, but none have been prosecuted.
Another 34 cases. Before you prosecute somebody, you have got to investigate.
So
you have to
this is what Human Rights Watch said last year. Bodies of people showing signs of torture continue to turn up in rivers, forests, quarries, mortuaries. The authorities have yet to investigate or prosecute anyone for these crimes. Kenya has a history of police brutality and lack of accountability for serious abuse.
So you want
That's
to believe,
Human Rights Watch.
You want to believe what Human Rights Watch said, not what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because
I'm going to believe a human rights group over a politician who started by saying, I won't give you straight answers.
It is their take, Mehdi. It is their take. And I didn't come here to give their take. I came here to give my take and the perspective.
So they're wrong, you think? The police officers are being held to account?
They are wrong because the police officers must be held to account.
But they haven't been.
And that is why we have institutions that will hold them to account.
So what you said today about the deaths sounded good. You said it's regrettable, there should be no loss of life. That's what you say here. What you say in Kenya is a little bit different. This is what you said in December about the abductions of young people. You said that they're a way for people to basically con the system. You said these people, quote, they're not really abducted, you said, quote, they're locking themselves in Airbnbs with their girlfriends and hiding. Are you saying that all these abductions, Kenyan parents crying over missing children, bodies turning up in rivers, that's people pretending, hiding with their girlfriends in an Airbnb? Do you understand how offensive that sounds?
Mehdi, I was speaking in Bungoma County. And the context was the clamor for, there was the misconception that every other abduction in the country was being perpetuated by security agencies. But what I said is that we have laws in the country that people who are construed to have broken the law in terms of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, if they are found culpable, the DCI or the police should and must arrest them and take them before courts of law, because that is what they deserve. And the police and security agencies have no business abducting anybody, and nobody should be abducted.
But they are abducting people.
By security agencies.
But they are abducting.
Allow me to make my point, because you asked me a question. And it is in that context then that I said, and again, it is not all cases, Mehdi, that were out of abductions or what was construed to be abductions. And let me tell you, there were cases where people, somebody was holed up in an Airbnb, but reported himself as abducted.
But for you as a leading politician in the country, where people are being disappeared in a democracy in 2024, 2025, it seems a strange thing to focus on, not the kids whose bodies are being found in rivers and forests and warehouses with gunshot wounds to the head and the neck. And instead of focusing on that, you focus on one case of somebody in an Airbnb. Seems strange.
Mehdi, I also say there were cases of political conspiracies where people...
Can we talk about the cases that are open and shut, police, intelligence services abducting kids? You accept that happens in your country? Your government and your intelligence services have abducted innocent people. You accept that?
It has been claimed. Those are matters.
Not claimed, it's happened.
It has been claimed.
You don't accept it's happened?
I do not believe there are enforced disappearances perpetuated by the state in Kenya. Not in this day and age. We have an administration which, for the first time, none other than the president himself committed that never again will Kenyans have to disappear and you fish their bodies out of River Yala or River Tana like happened some time back. And therefore, why I say they are claims, but it's because they are claims that are being investigated.
They're not claims. Let me give you a fact. Can I give you a fact?
Unless you give me fact.
I'm going to give you a fact right now, because the audience around the world watching may not know this. The Attorney General of Kenya, his son was abducted. Literally a serving member of the government. His son was taken. How did he get him released? Can you tell our audience?
The Attorney General of Kenya is called Dorcas Oduor.
Justin Muturi, the former Attorney General, he's moved on.
Abducted. The person who has alleged that his son was abducted is the former Attorney General, Justin Muturi. And
how did he get his son released?
And I'll tell you again, I have read from the media, heard Justin Muturi what he said, just as you heard it. It is an allegation by Justin Muturi, somebody who has...
Justin Muturi says he went to the president and said, President Ruto, the intelligence service have taken my son. President Ruto called the head of your intelligence service and his son was released.
Have you heard Mehdi from President Ruto on the same? Have you heard from the director of intelligence?
You tell me what's President Ruto's position. Has he denied it?
Have you heard from him?
No, I don't live in Kenya. You're the expert. Has President Ruto denied that?
So why don't you allow then me to tell you my
Please
take?
do.
Because that's your take.
Please.
From what has been reported.
That's not my take. I'm reporting a member of your government. This is amazing. I'm quoting a member of your government, not the opposition, a member of your government who you're calling a liar because he says his son was abducted.
That's why I told you Justin Muturi, the former Attorney General and current Minister for Public Service,
yes,
is a politician to begin with, has beef with his boss.
Okay.
In the government he serves.
Wow. So he made up a story about his son being abducted.
There are reasons. Wow,
Kenyan politics.
Will you allow me
Please.
to make my points?
Please, this is just, I'm stunned.
There are reasons why Justin Muturi was removed as Attorney General around the time of the demonstrations in June of last year. There are reasons probably why Justin Muturi knows he's probably on his way out. It is him who has made those allegations. That is a matter under active investigations. As I told you,
has President Ruto denied it?
We have got, you need probably to invite him and ask him.
You can't
I
speak
am not
for
President William Ruto, neither am I his spokesperson.
Has he denied it? It's a simple factual question, yes or no?
I have not heard him, and I don't know if he has been asked to...
So one of the, I just want to recap for our viewers, just so we follow. A minister in the Kenyan government has said that his son was abducted by the intelligence services and the president of Kenya had to intervene to release his son. You suggest the minister is lying and on his way out, but the president hasn't denied any of this happened.
I don't suggest. I tell you emphatically, the minister has reasons to lie. Okay. Emphatically. He has reasons to lie.
And he's on his way out?
He definitely knows it.
All right, Justin Muturi, if you're watching, you may want to put your resume out there.
Let me tell you, Mehdi. Let me tell you, because it's all politics.
Even the abduction of his son is politics?
It is all politics. It's playing politics with a very unfortunate incident.
Let's bring in our panel now to see what they think about all of this. I'm going to go first to Irungu Houghton, who is the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya. Irungu, your organization has been documenting a lot of these abductions. You yourself, I believe, have spoken to some of the abductees and their families. Kimani suggests that this is kind of water under the bridge. There's no real evidence for now. A lot of it is politics. What's your view?
I mean, I think there has been a trend of targeting dissent, people who have protested in our streets, excessive use of force against people essentially just expressing the right to assembly. And in one case, for example, this young man was essentially held incommunicado. He was stripped naked. He was shaved, not just on top of his head, but in his pubic areas. He was interrogated ad nauseum about who his connections were, and all he had done was to post cartoons and artificially generated images onto the on his Twitter handle.
Images of what, can I ask?
Of the president in a casket.
Is that appropriate? Somebody makes fun of the president in Kenya and they get tortured like this?
When William Ruto became president, when the buck stopped at his desk, he took decisive action to end the extrajudicial killings that were happening. True, what Irungu says is true. There was a case of about, I don't know if there were 3 or 4 young Kenyans who were allegedly abducted, and it went out that
not allegedly. They were abducted.
They were abducted, as it was reported. They returned back to their families. There was one case where one of them turned back, appeared in a disco at night with a fully charged phone. So you need to ask yourself where
I don't understand what the battery power of phones has to do with torture and human rights in Kenya.
If I am abducted and kept incommunicado without a phone or anything, I do not expect you to have a fully charged phone and to reappear after 2 weeks. But do you deny
they were tortured? I mean, Irungu just described horrific torture.
I am not denying anything if you listen to me, and please listen to me keenly, because as I said, Mehdi, there are cases of abductions. As to who is abducting people is a question.
They say the police. Am I wrong, Irungu? They're saying security services.
They say so. The police say it is not us. So what do we do in a country with institutions that work? Allow the investigative agencies and institutions to investigate and get to check who has abducted who.
So on that note, I just want to bring in some more panelists. It's a good point to raise there. Awino Okech is a professor of feminist and security studies at the University of London, SOAS. Kimani says, what do you do in a country where the institutions work? And I want to ask you, do the institutions work in Kenya? Is there accountability? What is your perspective?
I think we must begin by recognizing, Mr. ICHUNG'WA, that there's a huge trust deficit with the Ruto regime. You earlier on spoke about the fact that you're 2 years into a 5-year term. We're all employees. Some of us are employees. Your employer does not wait for you to reach your end of contract to tell you, have you performed well or not? We all have performance reviews and performance contracts. And I think the citizens who voted for you are saying things are not working. I do not believe that institutions are working effectively, because if I tell you that people are being abducted outside your house and you say it's not my people, then your answer should be to tell us who those are. You're not giving Kenyans any confidence if you say it's not the police, it's not the NIS, but somehow we don't know who they are. And we're supposed to automatically assume that that's fine since it's not the police and National Intelligence Service. Trust must be rebuilt, Mr. ICHUNG'WA, if we are to trust the Ruto government. Do
you want to respond to Awino?
Yes, and I agree with her that trust must be earned, not actually rebuilt. You earn your trust from your actions, and that is why it is only right that we allow the institutions to investigate so that those who claim they have been abducted, because as I said, there are criminal elements that have been involved. And I remember last year, at the heat of the youth demonstrations in June last year, I think around July or August, if I'm not wrong, bodies were discovered in a place called Kware in Embakasi, just outside the airport in Nairobi. And it turned out that somebody, some sort of crazy serial killer, was killing ladies and dumping their bodies there. Therefore, you can imagine what would have happened if we were all quick to judge and say, yes, these are protesters, young protesters, in the backdrop of what was happening then, who have disappeared and now their bodies are dumped there.
Before I go to our third panelist who's been waiting patiently, just Irungu, very quickly, just comparing, Kimani seems to be suggesting that pre-2022, there was lots of bad stuff, and since then things have improved. As someone who's covered multiple governments over multiple years, do you agree with that?
No. I mean, I think what has happened in the last 6 months has been really remarkable and very scary for many Kenyans. 89 abductions, 63 deaths, 29 still missing. These are not normal times. I mean, if you put together the number of people who were killed in 2023 and 2024, that is 4 times the number that were killed during the multi-partyism period and the struggle for multi-partyism. So we've seen a real jump in these figures. But it's not just the figures, it's just what happens to a family, to a community whose young one has had their life ripped from them. So I think we have to get beyond the numbers to just think about what does it mean for the people that you mentioned that are finding their way in body bags in mortuaries in Kenya. It has to stop.
Moses Langat, I want to bring in. You are a community leader, Kenyan community leader in the diaspora. I believe you're also one of the authors of the party manifesto in 2022. So I do want to ask you the same question I asked Kimani at the start. What do you make of this study that was done by a non-partisan group, which shows 14 promises out of 281 in the manifesto have been fulfilled? Do you think that's what's driving a lot of Kenyan frustration?
Maybe. First and foremost, we need to understand that the president has decided to be a leader, not to be a politician. I want to say that regarding the youth protests, they started a conversation with the president. He listened to them. The youth said they wanted part of the finance bill to be altered. The president listened to them. They had conversation. In fact, members of the parliament went back. They redrafted the finance bill. There were no shootings while they were asking for the changes. Trouble only started when we started having people going in to interfere. We had politicians going in. The youngsters, whom we appreciate, form over 75% of Kenya's population. About 12% of them are unemployed.
Protests were politically motivated, not driven by organic anger from young people?
The young people were angry. These are well-educated people. They have nothing to do. These are the messes that the current government inherited. And through the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, which the president always talks about, and he prioritized 5 areas, is to create jobs for these people, to create things to do.
You keep saying inherited. Isn't President Ruto, wasn't he a long-standing senior member of the previous government?
Well,
how do you inherit something you were in?
Mehdi.
Listen, Mehdi.
What am I missing?
Mehdi, let me just explain, because post-2017, William Ruto was deputy president just by name.
Okay.
That's a fact of life.
Fine.
And therefore, when the
Fair
panelist speaks about inheritance, he knows.
I do want to talk more about President Ruto. We're going to do that in the second half.